Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Craig Senecal, a friend of Eric Zamagowski, a guest on the show a while back. And I'm excited to talk with Craig today and find out what he's up to. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Craig, and welcome to the show.
Hey Ed, it's great to meet you and spend some time with you. Having a mutual friend as Eric. Eric serves on the board with me on the World Institute for Action Learning, the USA division. I am the senior director for employee experience at the New York Public Library. I've been working there for about 10 years, and I've been in the learning world for close to 25, 30 years now. And so I am all things learning, all things leadership, that sort of thing. I head up a couple different divisions here at the library. Learning and development and organizational development is one of them. The volunteer department, talent acquisition, and career mobility. So again, leadership, learning is all my ball of wax.
What a fascinating job you have.
Yeah, it
Come
is
on.
an iconic institution. And our president likes to say over and over again, libraries are about democracy.
Yeah,
And we're speaking on election day, so what better time to talk about the library and leadership than on election day?
I love libraries. I really do. When I was a child, my mother used to take me to the library every week, and I'd check out two or three books and read them, and we'd go every week. Every week we would go, and
So we are more than books these days. As you might imagine, we are about learning. We have how to do coding, how to apply for a job. We have internet help. We offer help for people coming out of the prison system. We actually run a library in the prison system here, and so we really see ourselves as supporting patrons, but learners, readers, researchers, and creators.
yeah.
It's a great place to be.
Well, I guess I betrayed my bias, which is that libraries are about books. But I knew that was changing because a lot of the books I buy are books that used to be in libraries, and they got the imprint of the library where it's coming from, where it's been sold, and so I would assume that now a lot of your holdings are now digitized. Is that correct?
We are in the process of that. I mean, we've been operating for 125 some odd years. And of course, a lot of our holdings are physical materials that we keep either on site here in New York City or in our shared facility in Princeton. And we are in the process of digitizing many of those assets so that anybody in the world, we like to think of ourselves now as the world's library, because anybody in the world can get access to our materials and our assets.
I like that. Yeah, but I'm still kind of captured in the old school of I like the physical book in my hand. And I buy lots of books. I have
I,
a
you know,
library.
I I work with a lot of folks like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
I
I'm
like the
sure you
smell of the book. I like the way it holds. I am a digital native. I love reading on my Kindle. I like having the ability to pick from hundreds of books on my Kindle and take it wherever I want, the beach, the airplane, you name it, without a heavy book. So um, I like both.
I was in London a couple of weeks ago, and I found a book, a really nice bookstore, small, really nice bookstore, a half a block from my hotel, and I went in there several times, obviously, and walked out with I think I spent £100 on books while I was there, and no regrets at all. I mean, it's and there were things I knew I couldn't get here in the States. There are, very, very British publishers, and so
No such thing as a bad book, right? Takes you to another world. You get a new experience. You get some learning out of it.
absolutely. I totally agree with you. So you're involved in the learning aspect of the employees of the library. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what does that look like? What's the scope of learning that the library wants to have for its employees?
Well, it is about the employee life cycle, right? So everything from uh, and that's my job, the employee experience. So, right, from the recruiting experience, the experience you have before you get a job here, the onboarding experience you have, your new hire training that you take when you come on board. And of course, we all know that the majority of the learning that adults do is on the job. It's not actual formal classroom training. It's coaching from your boss, participating in projects and learning as you go along. And so there's much of that, conferences that you participate in. We often conduct uh, conferences in-house. So we like to do in-house learning rather than send people out because as a very large institution, it makes more sense to do so. And of course, the day-to-day learning, we have a leadership training program that we call Leadership for the Future. And it's designed for new to mid-level managers to learn about what it's like to lead teams today, which is very different than leading teams when I first started to lead teams as a new manager. Um, you know, we never considered um, where people were coming from, the diversity of the person, the background that they brought to the job, right? Everybody kind of had to fit this is what leaders do model. And that's not the case anymore because people come from all sorts of backgrounds and experiences, and they bring all of that with them to work. And they leverage that to manage their teams. Likewise, if you want to really manage the team and motivate them and engage them, you have to understand where they're coming from, what motivates them, and tap into that in the best possible way. So it's not the command and control leadership style that I learned, 35 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a different world.
Yeah, it's no longer a role and a title. It's now how we function within the job, which is exciting to me. I mean, that's because when you think about it, you're inviting each employee to be their best self at work. Not many
Exactly.
places are able to do that now.
Um, Listen, I mean, if you work in a large organization, it's harder, right? Because they want cookie cutter. They want everybody to kind of be behaving in a certain way because that's how that wheel keeps turning.
Right.
We have the ability, although we're a large organization of 2,700 people, we do have the ability because we are so spread out, 88 branches, 3 research centers, 1 central admin team, because we're so spread out across 3 boroughs in Manhattan, we have the power to kind of be like, all right, go and manage your team in the way that makes sense because each of our branches sits in a neighborhood, and that neighborhood has its own character and it has its patrons that are looking for certain things that are kind of native to their neighborhood and allowing them to have kind of ownership over leading the team, managing the materials that they bring into the location. It's a whole different world.
Would you say that the job, particularly at that local branch level, now is to become a person who creates a network with the patron, and that
Yeah,
you're sharing and you're saying how can we help the community and how can you help the library and how we have this kind of mutual need to support one another.
exactly. I mean, um, libraries have always have been a community center, right? And now they really are a true community center because you're not only getting learning there, you're not only getting materials there, but you're getting support from the team that works there. Hey, you're looking for a job? I can help with that. Let me get you logged onto the computer. Let me show you some learning around building a resume. Oh, you're looking for language resources, maybe because English is not your first language. Hey, we have got free, not only do we have free classes in it, but we have all sorts of other support that we can provide to you as well. So getting to know your community, getting to know your patrons really does drive kind of like the business of that particular branch, to your point.
So if at one point in time, when it was much more of a top-down structure, the library operated as kind of a global entity, and everything kind of was focused on the center, the main library or whatever that structure is. And but now it's diffused out into the community, and it's much more of a resource. I mean, I love that because my I'm building a library because I want to have something of value when I die that can be passed on, that's tangible. And I'm in the process of creating it upstairs here in this house that I moved into earlier this year. And it's been a challenge because this is the first time in my whole career I've had all my books out of the boxes.
And now you can see them.
I can see them, and now I have to categorize them. And my son was with me over the weekend. We were going through boxes, and he says, "So what category is this, Dad?" I said, "Well, history, I guess, but it's not really history, is it?" He says, "No, it's an essay. It's a book of essays." Well, but I don't have a category for essays. I said, "Well, maybe you need to have a category for it." So I have a shelf for essays now. It's that kind of constantly looking what you have and discerning what is the value here, and you classify it according to the value that you want others to see it as.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we are a trusted source of learning and information. There are no higher ratings for trusted civic people than librarians. They are the most trusted people in the United States. Even or as an institution, libraries are rated even more highly than the post office. So people trust their local librarian, people trust librarians because we don't take sides. We're more interested in providing you with the information that you need to support whatever argument you're making or support whatever project that you're working on. That's what gets us up in the morning, gets us out of bed in the morning, is helping people. And we just couldn't be more thrilled with our mission to promote learning to everybody.
In the larger industry of libraries, industry is the wrong word, but the larger ethos of libraries, nationwide, globally, is what you all doing the trend? Is this where all libraries are headed, or is it this an anomaly? And that you should be the trend, but it's not there yet. What's going on with libraries more broadly around the world?
I'd like to say that we're the leaders in the library business as being one of the largest libraries in the world. But I think to take it back to your point earlier about being ensconced in the community, I think it depends on where you are. And, we're in New York City and we're big. And so we have to be many things to many people. But your local library, wherever you are, is serving the community and tailoring the needs to that particular community. And so I think it depends on the system that you're in and what the community looks like. And I think that's why we've created so much trust and value for our communities, because we serve the community and give them what it is that they're looking for.
Am I correct in my recollection that the main library in New York has these large lion statues on the front door at the
You
front
are
steps?
correct. Those are patience and fortitude. They
Oh,
have names. Patience and fortitude.
so in your onboarding of new staff, is that part of the lessons or the content that they're provided?
Yeah, it's absolutely part of the orientation. In addition, that building is a beautiful, beautiful building. We do give a tour to our new employees. We through the building, but we also have something that we're very proud of is that we've built state-of-the-art shelving and holding areas for materials under Bryant Park. So our library sits adjacent to Bryant Park, which is a great community area as well. So we've built storage underneath the park. And so we take our new employees on a tour of our state-of-the-art facilities underneath the park. It's a huge win for us.
I know Bryant Park well. That's when come to New York, I stay in a hotel quite close to there. So yeah, well that's great. Okay, I want to shift to this thing that you and Eric share, which is this interest and passion for action learning. I I want to assume that I know what that is, but I'm not going to. And I'd like for you to describe this to me because I have the sense that we're aligned in the way we look at the world and particularly how people learn. So let's talk about action learning for a minute. What give us kind of a thumbnail sketch of what that means.
So action learning is a facilitated problem-solving session led by an action learning coach, and it only has two ground rules. The first ground rule is that made in response to a question, which seems like a simple
Craig, would you? I lost you for a second. Would you go back a
ground
second?
rule, but it is not simple. You look like you have a question. Yes.
Yeah, I lost you there for a second. And so let's go back to say the first ground rule. At that point, that's where please
Sure.
start again there. Thank you.
Sure. The first ground rule is that statements may only be made in response to a question.
Hmm.
So what generally happens in training, right? Everybody has a point of view. Everybody's making statements. Um, and there is no, to our point earlier about how leaders kind of jump into solution building, that's what we find in action learning is our leaders struggle with this ground rule. Statements may only be used in response to a question because they want to jump right to the solution. Hey, we're high paid leaders. I'm getting paid to find a solution. But what we know, and I'm sure you understand this, Ed, more than anybody, is that unless you know the true source of the problem or there is agreement on the problem, you can't find a solution.
Right.
All you're doing is kind of slapping ideas against the wall. So the first ground rule is statements can only be made in response to a question. The second one is a powerful rule as well, which is that the action learning coach is only there to ensure that learning is happening. So that action learning coach is there to intervene anytime they see a moment for learning. So if the group is kind of veering off course, they're not following the ground rules, they need an intervention, or the action learning coach wants to step in and ask some questions to make sure that everybody's staying on track. That's what the action learning coach is there for. We're not involved in solving the problem for the group. We're only there to make sure that you're learning. At least one action comes out of every session. That's how simple the process is.
Yeah.
For the learners, as a coach, you're paying attention the whole time. You're consistently looking for opportunities to learn. You're consistently looking for opportunities to intervene to make sure that the group is staying on track, that they're staying focused on understanding the problem and not the solution. So it's simple for the participants once they get their hands around how to ask a question, which tends to be the biggest challenge for a new action learner, is they want to jump in and start making statements. So just take it back a little bit. Those are the ground rules. The whole process starts off because you have one person who has brought a problem for the group to solve. And they are allowed to explain the problem in their own words in under 2 minutes. So here's my problem. Here's how I see it. I'm looking for help. And the action learning coach says, who has the first question?
Wow. That's
And we
um
get going.
that's fascinating. And it's fascinating because it's not brainstorming.
Mm-mm. And why? So that's really interesting because Eric and I were talking about this. The whole storming, norming, forming, that whole process doesn't happen in action learning. And listen, I believe in that process, the brainstorming process and the forming and norming, all of that. But the challenge with processes like that is that it leads differently thinking people out of the process.
Mhm.
If I am somebody who is neurodiverse, I'm not participating. I might be listening. I might be afraid to participate. If I am somebody who's new to the group or somebody who has some fear of that something that I will say will be perceived negatively or be used against me or perceived negatively on me, I won't participate.
Right.
So the two things that work really well in action learning are if you are neurodiverse, it is a great process for you because um, many neurodiverse folks suffer from RSD, which is rejection sensitivity disorder. And we are terrified of being rejected or being perceived negatively. And this process where I'm only asking questions allows me to be curious and probe for understanding without any judgment from the rest of the group, because that is the set standard. Everybody does it. Anyone can ask a question of anyone at any time. Powerful, gives the neurodivergent person some space. Um, it provides some structure. And because neurodiverse folks are super curious and ask lots of questions, it's a perfect process for them.
I totally identify with that.
And to talk a little bit about psychological safety, you know, it is such a safe process for folks because it allows the team of action learners or the set, as we call them, to really be themselves. It invites them to work on problems and issues together to seek help and feedback on things. Um, there's because of the ground rules, because there is this structure, because we know the coach will intervene if someone is not following the rules,
Right.
and we trust that, then we trust that no one's out to get us, right, in the process. And um, everybody in action learning is seen as a valuable member of the team, and everyone can contribute. In fact, if you are not contributing, we would hope the action learning coach steps in and says, "Hey, group, what are you noticing about the participation level of everyone in the group?" Oh, well, not everybody is participating the same way. Okay, so what's the impact on our understanding of the problem if everyone doesn't participate?
Right.
And an action learning coach is only asking questions. I may say, this is what I've observed, but I need to follow it up with a question as well. And so, people talk about psychological safety and they talk about the leadership and that leaders are responsible for psychological safety. But in everything that I've read, from Dr. Amy Edmondson to any number of articles that I've read on it, it's that the entire team is responsible for psychological safety. And we put way too much effort on or putting the pressure on the leader to create a psychological safe team. So listen, action learning is about what we can all do to solve the problem, which creates psychological safety in and of itself. You know, a lot of question that a lot of learners and sets ask is, hey, I'd love to get your feedback on my thought. Tell me more. It's built to actively solicit ideas, get ideas out of people. And it provides feedback in a respectful way. So at the end of every session, um, we ask every person, because the focus is equal on action and learning. So yes, an action is going to come out of today's session, but everybody's been learning in the process. Everybody had to commit at the beginning of the session to a leadership piece that they wanted to work on. It could be something like actively listening or ask great questions, whatever it happens to be. At the end of the session, the coach is working on, and they have to say, well, I did okay or I didn't. But we then ask the participants, so how did Ed do in active listening? And we solicit, so give me an example. And so I'm working on my leadership skills. I'm working on asking great questions. I'm working on helping somebody solve a problem. It's multifaceted.
Okay.
You
Uh,
look, you
I'm,
look fascinated.
I'm totally into this, and I love this, I'm thinking about all these situations I've been in over my career where this would have been valuable. So let me pose a couple of questions. The
Great.
first is this a technique? Let's say you have your weekly team meeting and you're reviewing what you're doing, and then someone says, I have a question, then automatically does that mean that the action learning methodology gets implemented?
So you can use pieces of the action learning methodology in your leadership. So what I like to do as a leader, as a coach, is my own belief that coaching is all you do is ask questions and seek to understand. I want to understand. I want to understand kind of what's hiding under this rock that I just picked up. Tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you make that decision? What's the impact when you made that decision? What happened? Um, what could you do differently next time? So I'm just asking a series of questions. So I'm using that model
Does
in coaching.
does this require that there be a um, that the group has a form to it that is consistent? Let
Yes,
me give you an example of a situation I was in
sure.
25 years ago.
Great.
I'm I'm hired to do a 2-hour network community building
Mhm,
module during a leadership day that a community leadership group was doing. The
mhm.
first person of the day was the economic development director of the Chamber of Commerce. And there were about 45 participants, and 5 of those participants hijacked his presentation because they didn't like the way the chamber approached economic development, and they didn't allow him to speak. And he just said, "Listen, I have to go. I have another commitment," and so he left without finishing his. And I was up next, and so I went to the woman who is the head of this thing, and I said, "I think we need to debrief what has transpired here because this was not a healthy thing for this group." So I said, we're going to debrief what transpired, and I want to know what you think. And immediately I call them the gang of 5, went into justification mode. And about 17 of the 45 spoke during the first 20 minutes. And they were saying things like, well, if I'd known this is what was going to go on, I wouldn't have come today. I have work to do. This is a waste of my time. This. So they were all this negative feedback. And and then I said, okay, all of you who have spoken over the last 20 minutes, I'm silencing you so the rest of the group has an opportunity to say something. And the rest of the group did for the next 40 minutes. So at the end of that hour, we had reached a pretty clear idea of what had transpired. and then we went into the mode of this is how we build community. We have to have community. We have to have honesty. We have to have respect. We need to be able to communicate with one another. We need to be able to listen. All these things that you've described, that, this was coming out in what I was saying. And what was missing, Craig, was structure, which
Mhm.
I know it sounds, based on our conversation before we went on, that sounds funny. But the structure of this, I really like, because what it does give that safe space. It does tell people that your personhood, your persona in this group is respected, and we're going to not take advantage of that. And I love that, because I think, I mean, in my experience over all these years, I do find that there are some people who are very heavy-handed. There are some people who want to dominate. They feel like it's their mission to dominate. Um, they verge on being bullies oftentimes, and people who are quieter, maybe more sensitive. You use the term neurodiverse. I think that's a perfect term for a lot of these people. They have a sense of not fitting in. All of these kind of conditions that people bring with them to work, and that never get addressed. And what I hear you saying is that this is a simple way to address problems, so that everyone has a voice and everyone leaves the room feeling like they're not they were respected, but now we can trust one another because we have actually talked at a level of respect that builds trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so if we were to work on that together, let's say this all just kind of happened. And let's say you were the person who was brought in as a consultant and you realized, oh, this is a problem. The way they're conducting meetings is a challenge. People are not getting a lot out of it. I would meet with you as a coach and say, okay, you're going to be the problem presenter, Ed. In one or two sentences, what do you think your problem is? And you might say something like, yeah, we we have some big talkers who want to hijack meetings, and so our meetings are never productive.
Right.
And so I would put together a set. Now, an action learning set is 5 to 8 people. And why is it 5 to 8 people? Because if you have more than 5 to 8 people, not everybody can participate.
Right.
And so it's very prescriptive to say if we can't have everybody participating on a similar level, then we're not interested. And so what we have done in the past is if 45 people wanted to work on this problem, we'd break off into sets
Mm-hmm.
of 8 people. We'd
Yeah.
have 5 or 6 of them, and we'd have 5 or 6 coaches, and they'd all bring the same problem to the table, and you'd be amazed at the different what the consensus on the problem would be as a result of the group, and what the solution would be as a result of the members of the group. And so it really clearly says there is no one solution to any problem. There are multiple solutions to any problem, and it's who you have in your set and the questions that you ask that determine what that action and what the learning is going to be.
Yeah. I totally get that, and I totally believe in that, and I love what you're describing, and I have a use for this, and we'll talk after the show. I have a use for this that I think you'll be pleased with. Um, so, how far has action learning spread in the business world?
No,
Where is the? I mean, if we're talking, let's talk about the action learning as an innovative business tool. And what's its use? What's the use factor now? How far is it being used?
um, I wish it was being used more often. I think there are different methods of action learning. We do believe that the WIAL method is the best method. Dr. Marquardt and B. Carson and our founders really have done a lot of research. And when something is not as structured, you don't get the same kind of results out of it. And there's a lot of, if you put too much wiggle room into the process, then things can go off the rails really quickly. And so we have this kind of prescribed process to it. So we are entrenched deeply into the armed forces. A lot of the areas of the armed forces, particularly the organizations that support the armed forces, like the missile manufacturers and the technology manufacturers, support this. We are entrenched deeply at Microsoft. Many years back, we've trained a bunch of coaches for them, and it is deeply entrenched, just as it is deeply entrenched here at the library. So we use action learning in our leadership development. And it is rated as the most favorite or best part of our leadership development program because we bring together 5 to 8 people, and they work on problems together. And it breaks down the silos in the organization, because people come together and realize they have the same problems as everybody else. These leaders from different parts of the organization, it doesn't matter if you're a junior or senior, we're all kind of faced with the same problems, people problems, process problems, organizational problems, and we can work together to solve them. So it's entrenched in a lot of leadership programs in the States.
It would
We'd like it to be bigger.
it would seem that if this was widely practiced in a corporation, that it would have an effect upon how they choose senior executive leadership. Because let me describe what I mean by that.
Sure.
What I see that this program, this method, this structure does, it supports something that I've seen throughout my career. And it's this long phrase that I have, which is there is a persistent residual culture of values that persists because it resides in the relationships of the people. So I see in action learning, what you're really doing is validating the values of the group and possibly of the entire company and embedding those values in actually how people relate to one another, which I think is the real challenge of senior leadership, which is to facilitate that kind of development of their people. Because when you develop your people in that way, they are becoming leaders in effect. For me, all leadership begins with personal initiative to create impact that makes a difference that matters. That means anybody can be a leader of impact, and then you want them to be leaders of impact where they are within the structure of the organization. So you want the person that's checking people out at the local branch of the library to have a way of being with the customer, with the library patron, so that the library patron feels like she understands me or he understands me, and I'm going to come back more often because I like how this person treats me, because that's the persistent residual culture of values being expressed through the relationships of staff with customers, and I think that's one of those things that is practiced but is not well understood.
Listen, I'm with you. Many moons ago, I used to work for a little company called Macy's. Perhaps you've heard of them.
Yeah.
And our president, our president used to say, "Better people, better everything."
Yeah.
That when you have a well-trained, engaged workforce, everything falls in line. And I truly, truly believe that. And if managers took the time to ask the right questions, employees would be happier. Their employees would consistently be learning.
Yeah.
And the results would be better. We have those results. Get out of the results business and get into the development of our teams, because the most important resource we have is our people.
So how long have you been utilizing this methodology at the library?
The entire 10 years that I've been here, I worked for another organization before this one. And so I was introduced to action learning. I had a sticky problem to solve at my previous organization, which was some pretty senior people were not getting along, and they weren't they were struggling. And so I was looking for ways to take the ego out of the problem solving. And I met B. Carson. And she really turned me on to action learning, and it worked so effectively. And when I came to the library, um, some pretty senior people at the time uh, were faced with some challenges too, and we put action learning into place and dug down. We thought maybe this is a communications problem. Maybe this is a way of working problem. And what we discovered in the first really big action learning session that we did together as a team is that we had a trust problem.
Yeah.
We didn't trust each other. What other brainstorming or learning method do you know of that after 2 or 3 sessions, a senior leadership team is going to say, we have a trust problem?
Not
I don't
many.
know too many.
Yeah. It's a huge problem everywhere, and so I would imagine that one of the benefits is that your retention of good people grows. Is- I mean, if you have people who are learning to utilize this method, then they're going to want to stay because they're going to work in an environment where they're respected and they're trusted. So is retention something which is improved? Retention of good staff, is that improved over the 10 years that you've been doing this?
We do see a retention in management. Yes, absolutely. Where we're delivering it. It's really hard right now to measure retention just because of what we have been through over the
Right.
last 4 or 5 years, right? So between COVID and then the Great Resignation, it's really hard to finger on how successful we've really been with action learning. But I will tell you that we have some brilliantly designed activities and engagements around some really great topics, conflict resolution and leading by example and persistence and perseverance. But far and away, what people take out of our leadership development program is, ooh, that action learning. I really got a lot out of it. And around asking questions. I've taught coaching for many years, and that's always the stumbling block. I don't know how to ask a question. Many of them, when you start in action learning, they start asking. Uh, they think they're asking a question, but they're really doing. It's a solution in the form of a question.
Yeah.
Have you tried? Oh, that's not a question. That's not seeking to understand. You're just telling me what you think I should be doing. And a lot of managers do that.
And that's sort of sneakily bringing in the brainstorming model. Have you tried this? I have this idea. It's that sort of thing. Well, this is really fantastic. I love what you're doing. I love what you've described. I'm glad to know about it, and I feel like I need to know more. So my last question for you is, um, if we look at the library as a microcosm of what is good in the world, which is I'm suggesting that we're looking at your library as a microcosm of what's good in the world because of what you're doing there. I mean, I think the fact that this is happening there on a widespread basis is a very encouraging thing. But as you look at the larger world outside the doors of your library, um, where do you find hope for the future? Is it in carrying this to other places, or how, I ask this of almost every one of my guests, where do you find hope?
What if, as human beings, instead of jumping to conclusions, we ask questions to seek to understand the other person standing in front of us?
Yeah.
This is what action learning teaches. Seek to understand, find out why, because I'm genuinely curious, because I'm genuinely interested. If we all behaved this way, we wouldn't have the divisions, that we have today, because we better understand each other. And so yeah, my hope for the future is, do as leaders, are we seeking to understand our people as people? Are we seeking to understand what motivates them? Are we seeking to understand what's the best thing for not only the organization, but the people and the leader? Can we find solutions that benefit everyone? I think we can, by asking the right questions. And oh, by the way, bringing a diverse group to the table to ask those questions. Stop asking the same people over and over, the people that you trust or the people that speak up. There's so much to be gained by asking the people who don't speak up, who do have a point of view, who do have value. Everybody adds value. So yeah, that's what brings me hope.
You have described in many ways what my intention for the Eddie Network podcast to be, which is an open place, safe place for us to have a conversation. And maybe I need to learn to ask better questions, but I'm really interested in achieving what you are describing for us, where people feel a sense of safety in being able to express themselves. Eric calls the show an empty room. Others have called it an unscripted conversation. But I think when we enter into a conversation where the outcome is not predicted, is not already trying to be rationalized, that we have an opportunity to actually hear things that would be beneficial to the whole. And that's a lot of what I'm trying to do here. And you've just validated so much of what I'm about, and I'm really grateful to have had you on the show today.
And listen, I'm not only grateful to talk about action learning and the library, which I love so much, and so dedicated to our mission and the work that we do, but to our mission is to spread knowledge, to get information out there. And so it just was great to be able to do that. And what you have done for me is less about talking about action learning and more about kind of reinstilling the passion I have, not only for the method, but for the library and my work. And I truly appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because if I can accomplish that with every guest that I have, then I'm doing something very, very special. So thank you, Craig, for being here. Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
everybody, for watching. I hope this inspires you to go track down what action learning is about. I'm sure we'll put some stuff in the show notes. You're going to send me some stuff to put in the show notes so that you can find out about this. Because if you are say a middle manager, or you're a business owner, or you're just a worker, but you want to improve the quality of the interaction, the quality of the relationships in where you live and you work. I mean, we didn't even talk about how this applies to families. It definitely applies to families. All these things are there waiting for us if we want to apply ourselves to it. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Thank you, and bye-bye.